All right, I think we can go ahead and get started. Once again, my name is Rory Samper, a expert here at XTM International. Thank you for joining us today for our webinar series, our XTM Connect series on our Zendesk connector. And with that, just going to go over today's topics real quick. We're going to go through a really high-level Zendesk overview, looking at adding articles, sections, categories. We'll go through the XTM Connect UI, which is the actual connector, how you interact with it from a user perspective. Choosing the buckets. We'll then go through the different connector configuration options. So there's a fair number of options we can go through. So this can get a little complex if you're not familiar with them. So we'll go through and just to give you an idea of the possibilities as well. And then we'll also do a content round trip. So pulling the content from Zendesk, translating it, showing it in the workbench, finishing it out, and then seeing what that looks like back in Zendesk. So without further ado, we'll jump over to our instance of Zendesk here. So you can see in our managed articles, the content we'll be looking at today is our article 6 tips for website localization with one extra P in it, the typo. I added this, you can obviously see here 3 hours ago. Fairly straightforward as far as adding content itself. So adding it, you can choose to add an article, section, or category. An article will live within a section within a category. So when you're adding content, this will go a bit just to the configuration as well. So this will make a bit more sense when we get there. But so adding your title, your content, whatever it may be. But then when you're publishing the content, you also need to select the section. So in this case, our configuration is looking at specific section, and specifically the demo category here is how our connector is set up. So the demo category, and then choosing the demo section number 1. So this is where I've imported the content, and that file that I showed just a second ago. Supplementing it there is putting it in the location where the connector is looking for content. You also see that I have this content published. Just want to differentiate between published and draft content based on what we have in the connector configuration. And again, we'll go through that. You can choose if you only want content to be pulled from published, or if you only want content to be pulled from drafts. And so maybe just to stop there, if anyone else is kind of familiar with some of our other connectors, our Figma connector or AEM or one of our numerous other connectors, Zendesk and Git both work as the repo connectors. So in like an AEM or a Figma connector, the connector itself is integrated fully into those different CMSs. So from there, you're actually pushing content from those CMSs, so Figma, AEM, choosing your content, pushing it to XTM, so it's utilizing the API to create that project, use the project templates that you have selected. The difference between Zendesk, and so we'll see here Zendesk and Git, is that as repo connectors, what it's actually doing is the connector is synchronizing the content between, in this case, Zendesk and XTM. So it's kind of acting as a middleware there. So what that looks like is that we have our 6 tips in website localization. It's kind of straightforward text here. I'm going to go over to our demo instance of XTM. So this is obviously XTM itself. Going to go to XTM Connect. You may not see this on your own screen as soon as you have, if you have this turned on. So if you subscribe or already have our Zendesk or Git connector, you'll see this option here. You can also at the settings level choose who you would like to have access to this as well. So if you only want maybe a certain PM that's responsible for creating these projects or managing these projects, you can give just that PM access to XTM Connect. So clicking on XTM Connect, you'll see tasks and buckets. So buckets, you'll see Git and Zendesk. So in this case, we have both Git and Zendesk set up for this our demo instance of XTM. And tasks are the actual projects created from them. So when you create a task, and we'll go through that as well, when you create a task, it will still create a project like you normally would expect to see in XTM, but then it's also tracking it in the tasks here. So looking at the tasks, I can see all the different projects that have been created, the buckets that were used, the customer used, project template used, language pairing, when it was created, updated, the status as well. So if you're just trying to look for just, for instance, your Zendesk projects and just the status here, you can see that here in this far right column. As far as our buckets are concerned, we're going to go to Zendesk. See, we only have one bucket configured. You can essentially have an unlimited number of buckets, basically, that are looking at different repositories within Zendesk, pulling in different content types. That's also having different buckets is how you control different target languages you would like to have be used. So in this case, any project or any content that is synchronized between XTM and Zendesk, any project that's created using that content is going to have all these language pairs associated to them. So I may be pulling the same content, but want to have, say, 3 different scenarios of different language sets. I could then have 3 different buckets, so then go into that particular bucket, pull the content, and these languages would be applied. So create a project is as simple as going to the hamburger menu, going to actions. You can say I could delete or deactivate the bucket at any point in time. Don't want to do that for this case. Select the bucket, and then we're going to get the UI itself. So you could obviously have a very small amount of content because it's a demo instance, but you can search for specific names. You can have it looking at multiple sections. So if you want to narrow it down to one section, as we saw within Zendesk, I only have the one demo section number 1. Same thing with categories. If you have labels associated to that content, if you're looking for content in a specific language, in this case, it'll be English UK, target languages. You can also see when things were created or updated. So content within Zendesk is so created and updated at certain times. So as content is updated, maybe you want to look for just content within Zendesk that's been updated within the last week. Again, where this connector is being pointed at, we'll show you that. So you'll obviously potentially have scenarios where you're updating content, but you want to push that delta basically for translation. That's a good way to kind of determine what content needs to be chosen. Another good visual is that you can see here, see how this is kind of grayed out, this option here. Well, this option is in black. This is telling me is that this is a new file. Again, I just added it a couple of hours ago. So it's a really good indicator just to come in here, take a look, and see this is new content that's been added. I can also see that this is a specific article. You can choose entire sections or entire categories for translation as too. So you don't have to choose. You have to choose article by article. So if I were to choose either of these options and create a task with them, it would include this one article. But if I have 10 articles under this section, I could just choose the section and it would pull all of that content and push it for translation. So to create the translation itself, very simple. Just have to check here whatever thing I would like to add for translation and hit create tasks. So now this is the same thing as if you were to create a project with an XTM. It's leveraging your translation memory. It's leveraging the project template that's associated in the connector. It's going through MT if necessary. The workflow is being created. The users are being assigned. So all of that fun automation stuff. This does take just a minute. So actually look at the configuration. So just I guess one thing to mention as well. I won't forget. So it's created by an updated information over here. So this is continually being updated. You don't need to do anything within Zendesk outside of actually create the articles or sections or categories. And the connector itself, which is the middleware between the two, is constantly synchronizing and looking for new content to be created. So that's where that pulled through. So I didn't have to push or do anything from here. All I had to do was publish the content, and that triggered the content to then be pulled into XTM Connect. Go to our tasks, see if that's open. Created yet. All right, so you can see our content right here. So this was just created. It is synchronized. Check and see if the actual project itself is created yet. Again, this could take a minute just depending on the TM leveraging and everything else that's going on. Great, so it actually is already created. So you can see here, again, the target languages, very small number of words. But before we actually go into that, I'm going to show the connector configuration options here. So this is your sheet. This is, again, something if you have the Zendesk connector, or if you ever move forward with the Zendesk connector, these are all things that we would configure on our side for you, unless it needs to be behind a firewall. But so kind of basic information from a Zendesk perspective, your account information, API, so we can create that connection, your XTM specific information. So this stuff is pretty straightforward. You can choose the customer that you want the Zendesk connector to be creating projects under. You could choose the project continuation or the configuration mode. So you can have it be normal, which is creating a new project each time you push content, or continuous project, where it's updating the same project continuously. You can have a project name, so a prefix for the project name itself. Sorry, Excel's giving me a little problem here. The source language, so again, you saw our source language is English UK. We have a number of target languages. So this is where we would choose what those we'd like to be associated. The template ID, so the template ID that is using within XTM, that's going to house your workflow, MT, maybe your SRX, ITS rules, a whole large list of potential options. Which items you like to pull. So if you do want to pull full categories, sections, or only articles. So you can see, like in our scenario, we saw both sections, we saw all three. So that's how we have our example connector set up now. The repository config specific options, so names or IDs of specific items, if you really want to narrow down what you're pulling from Zendesk. The group type, so if you want a single project to be created for a single item, or if multiple items can be within a single project. Translate label, so if you're using translate labels within Zendesk, if you want the connector to look at those to know if it should pull that content in for translation or not. Upload translations as drafts. So as go back to Zendesk here. So we're set up to be looking for new content to pull into XTM from the published, but you can also choose where XTM pushes that content back through. So as soon as the workflow is completed, the webhook then pushes the content back to Zendesk automatically. So you don't need to push translations from XTM back to Zendesk. It'll automatically do so, but you can choose where you want that. So, oftentimes you might want someone to review the content, or you don't want it to be published directly. So that would be the use case for upload translations as draft, true or false. If there's any attachments, you can include that as well. So we'll pull it down. So if you have a Word document or whatever to file format attached to the Zendesk article itself, that will also pull through for translation and be provided back as translated. If you want to download the content for translation, this is where we choose if we want to look at just published, just drafts, or all types of articles. Again, in our situation, we have only published. Apologies, I had to cough there. The repository configuration, so the source synchronization period. So you can choose how often the connector is looking at Zendesk and XTM Connect for new content. It could be as low as every minute. Once a minute's the minimum. So obviously pretty quick. Just use a quick pop content in there. And then the repository configuration upload mode, either a project or job. The differentiation here is that the job, if you choose a job, it's going to be pushing back files as soon as they're done, each individual file, whereas a project, well, each individual file and each individual language. So if you have 10 files in German, my first file is done, completing the workflow, it'll push that back and not wait for the rest of the content before pushing back if it's job. Whereas project is going to wait for all the content to be done and then push everything back at the same time. You can also automatically create projects, so you can choose which days those should be created. So XTM will look for basically the diffs, anything that would be basically black, as I showed you within Zendesk, essentially pulling through it as black, so it's new content or updated content, and would automatically create projects for that content on those days. Go back. Zendesk demo. So this portion is pretty straightforward if you know XTM. If not, you can see your metrics. We're just going to go through the workflow and not focus too much on our on the other aspects of XTM, because we just want to focus on the connector itself. Source content was already created, so we already automated the push of content back. So you can see it's all already emptied, mark the empty complete. So that's fully automated already. So if you had a human workflow translation, essentially this would just be ready for them to translate. They could come in and translate. As soon as they're finished translating, they would simply finish their task. It would move to the next step in the workflow, so on and so forth until you finish the final step. As soon as the final step is completed, they would mark it complete, and that would then trigger the pushback to Zendesk. So as you can see, sorry, I'm clicking too fast. So see here, this was synchronized. It's now finished because again, we had that full automation where we marked everything complete and just pushed it automatically. So you do the same thing. That would be kind of what I just showed here would be a good example of like utilizing a raw machine translation workflow, where simply pushing the content from or creating the project for the content from Zendesk into XTM, it automates the MT, finishes workflow, pushes the content back. And because that's finished, we should now see in our drafts all of our translated versions. So now we have our Japanese, French, Brazilian, Portuguese, German, and Spanish content. As soon as I could have someone review this content, or maybe just as a PM, I just want to take a look, make sure everything looks good. And as soon as it's ready, simply select my content and publish. And now it is live and ready to use on my my site here. It just takes a minute to update in Zendesk. So that is about 20 minutes, but so that's kind of the short and sweet of our Zendesk connector. So again, the key component is the kind of configuration portion of it. What you're doing here, so there's a fair bit of flexibility allowed. Creating those individual buckets themselves, you can provide for the automation aspect of it. So we can see within our project that we had, to see our project template. So our project template we used is our Zendesk demo template. So our connector is using that project template ID based on the configuration option here. So whenever we create a project from the Zendesk connector, from that bucket at least, it's utilizing this project template, which is telling XTM to leverage certain translation memories, to use not approved content, to set leverage matches from done, the workflow that should be utilized, the MT that should be used. So all that can be set up ahead of time in your templates. You're not choosing those each time. And each individual bucket that we showed can have, its own template ID associated to it, or they can all be tied to a single one. So there's a very large amount of flexibility involved there too. And again, you can really have any number of these different buckets associated to it to change your language pairs, your project templates, the customer associated to it. So there's just a lot of flexibility.